Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Caregiver's Toolbox, Tools for Everyday Caregiving, where my name is the intro wrong, right? Caregiver's Toolbox, Tools for Everyday Caregiving. My name is Ryan McAniff, and I am the owner of Minute Women Home Care. And on this podcast, doesn't matter if you make a mistake on the intro, we just keep rolling. And my guest today is Lee Berkowitz. He is down in Palm County, Florida, kind of my neck of the woods. And since I have a lot of family, I mentioned my dad on the podcast, Lee, and he's in Atlantis, Florida, just 10 minutes south of West Palm. But we have Lee Berkowitz, the owner of Welcome Back Home Care, passionate about providing care and helping seniors. And he's got as good, if not a background. He's got a real background. Lee, you've got an actual really nice background with palm trees, while mine is fake. So welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, although the background may be fake, you truly are your authentic self. Ryan, we appreciate it. And thank you for having me on the Caregiver's Toolbox. We wanted to do our pod swap because, hey, that's the thing to do. With Elder Care Insights, I'm super excited that I have a little bit of a platform, and just podcasters in general have their voice to be heard, and we'll continue to partner and, just kind of help grow the community. We're authentic in that, where we want to educate the public and help those adult children who are super concerned, anxious. I know we have this in common, and we want to take that anxiety and turn it into a bit of peace of mind, knowing someone has your back. Minute Women Home Care has been around for 50 years. Welcome Back Home Care has been around for 10 years. We have family in our background in the home care business. So we're trying to do things super different. What makes us different? The distinctions, pillars of distinction. But today, again, like you said, we're going to talk about this gray market, which is a little bit sounds a little bit nicer than the black market, right? It's the gray market, but it's still a gray area that we want to talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so what's interesting about our different, though we're both in home care, your agency operates a little bit differently than mine does. But we still deal with what's called gray market caregiving, which is when people are hiring caregivers privately with no agency involved whatsoever. So it's generally a private transaction between one party and another with no intermediary. And there's certainly pros and cons with that. I mean, there's no way to deny that there are some benefits. There's a reason why they're doing it. And obviously most people can guess it has to do with costs. But there's also some downsides that come to that. But maybe it would be good to start with kind of a little bit of your background and how your agency is a little bit different than other agencies out there.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And it certainly may have to do with cost. That's the first kind of thought that comes to mind, and that's understandable. And we'll get back to that, certainly. The pillars of distinction for us, we have our resource base, our organizational relationships that we've built through the 10 years, my own 10 years, plus, however many years my family's been in home care, 30 plus years. So I've been kind of listening in on the background, who are the most trusted resources. So we're trying to align ourselves with the greatest, most trusted resources. And yeah, we're human, but still we can be on time. We can try our best, and we can keep our word, and those types of people, and they can steer you in the direction of other great resources. So that's one pillar. Also, the customer experience. The degree in hospitality management has taught me a lot of things. Most importantly, the moment of experience, the service that we provide. Is this going to be a night and day type of a thing? Yeah, it most likely is, because you're always going to be able to reach me, the local mom and pop shop. We have that a bit in common as well. Where you're the local hardware store. You're not the Walmart where you're getting those cheap products. You're really we're really diving into each caregiver. And knowing which caregiver applies to each case. And, we know that you matter, your mom matters, your father matters, and we're going to do our best to pick the right caregiver. And that goes to the third distinction, is this caregiver quality. We're doing our best to be the most premier caregiver nurse registry in South Florida. And our team, is working hard on that. So those are three distinctions. And we can go on and on. Just the fact that you and I are talking right now is a bit of a distinction. You're in Boston. I just recommended your service because there's a lot of Bostonians come down, and people are really concerned about their parents. This particular person, their parents have COVID, and they're in Boston. And I said, look, give this person a call. And hopefully they call you because they're overwhelmed. She even said she's going to take a mental health day, because she's been doing so much caring and managing the care for her mother and father, and she wants the sister to help out. So we're starting to affect our quality of life here. The family dynamics are changing. We want the daughters to be daughters and the professional caregivers to be professional caregivers. So there's lots of resources to try to help. We get it. There are some obstacles to get through, financial, maybe one, but we always try our best to provide those resources in case, we know the other companies to facilitate these referrals to try to help. There may be VA benefits, there may be Medicaid, we're talking about. So, you don't have to work together with me at Welcome Back Home Care, but we're going to refer you. We're going to try our best to, give you something more than what you came and made that phone call.
Yeah,
with.
absolutely. And so
A piece of info.
you mentioned that you're a nurse registry. Can you define what that is?
Yes. So I believe I can define it. There's distinction here.
Yeah.
I'm no lawyer. I'm not an attorney. We've had this license for 9 years here. So as a nurse registry, we hire these 1099 independent contractor caregivers. So as a nurse registry, these caregivers actually have to be 1099s. So in South Florida, basically they're not W-2 employee. They're responsible. The main word right now is control. We have no control over these folks. We can't say you got to wear this uniform, and you have to work on this time. We work with their schedule, which I believe is pretty accommodating, and I'm sure other agencies do this as well. But we say, look, whatever your schedule is, we're going to work with you. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to ask you to do things and see if it works with you. So that's one thing. We're not going to treat these folks like an employee. They're going to be an independent contractor. We treat them independently. They know they're responsible for their updates and their continuing education and making sure. And we're just going to give them helpful reminders and resources of, where to go to update those things, the resources, which schools to go to nearby, which CEUs, continuing education units, or if your background check is up in a couple months, we'll give a friendly reminder. Hey, your background check may be up. You may want to get that renewed. So,
but you couldn't,
in a nutshell,
you couldn't
that's
take them off a case. If use the background check, for example, if you don't have the ability to say, if you don't get a new background check, you can't work for this client anymore, correct? Is that kind of like
we're also obligated by the Agency for Healthcare Administration, and we have a responsibility to keep our constituents in South Florida safe. So that's we're not allowed to continue having someone work if they don't have a background check that's updated. We're not willing to just take the the strike. I believe that's a fine line, because a gray area, so to speak, which will lead into our future conversation, where we have to make sure that caregivers are fully compliant. We have one person on our team that's compliancy. That's what they do, caregiver compliancy. So if they're not, we're responsible to they have to update with the Agency for Healthcare Administration. So it's not us telling them what to do. It's the Agency for Healthcare Administration. We're just reminding them on these things.
Gotcha.
So yeah, we can give a harsh reminder, I think.
All right,
It's
gotcha.
kind of semantics, to be honest with you.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I imagine a lot of families do have that question of like, hey, listen, what's the difference between a registry and what's and somebody who's employed, and then what are the benefits of that? And I mean, obviously, if you're having hundreds of conversations a year with families, that's probably a common question that comes up because they want to understand the how this whole industry works.
hmm Yeah, and I think they're okay with them being an independent contractor. Everybody signs paperwork before they get started. It's a very simple paragraph that says this is indicating that um, the caregiver is an independent contractor caregiver, and they basically can't. They don't have to listen to a third party. This is whether it's an outside nurse, or they're completely independent.
Yeah, yeah. So my understanding was like when we did nurse registry many, many years ago, and before, like I was the owner of the company, but I understood it was kind of like we can't. You use the word control. We can't really. We're not firing people. We're not doing yearly annual reviews. We're not doing these various things. We're an intermediary that's connecting two parties together, and we're
hmm
getting a fee for making that connection. And then
Yeah,
that fee for us was usually it was like an hourly fee. So if it was whether it was $2, $3, $4 an hour that we would take. And
yeah,
then so the kind of the benefit was, hey, listen, this is technically your employee. We're helping introduce that, but we don't have any managerial control over that in the sense of if somebody's, let's say they're CNA up in Boston, CNAs have to be renewed every 2 or 3 years, but home health aid licenses do not. If somebody's CNA was going to be um, was not going to be renewed, or they needed to renew it, and they said, yeah, we're just not going to renew our CNA. If they were your employee, you could say, well, then I'm going to remove you from this client's case because you're my employee until that is renewed. If they were a independent contractor, that
mhm.
discussion really needs to happen between the family and the caregiver. That isn't necessarily something that the registry deals with, but the registry then can never put they can make the decision not to put them on introduce them
Yeah,
to another family moving forward. So
yeah,
I'm just trying to bring up the distinction of kind of where that line is
sure,
between what managerial rules you can follow and you can't. At least that's the way it was up in
sure. No,
Massachusetts.
I'm
Maybe
happy
it's
to
different.
answer this question. And so we, the caregivers basically write us an invoice and on a time clock, and we advance their pay, right? Because they're working and the client is paying them, we're advancing their pay. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Gotcha. And then why do you think like when you're talking with families, what do you say, hey, listen, this is the reason why this is the best way to go about it? Like, what's the
Are you
benefit for the
speaking about
family?
for the client or for the caregiver?
For the clients. So why, like the clients may say, hey, why would I
Yeah.
think that would be interesting to know what
Look,
the benefits for them are too.
I like that. But what I go back to is what's best for these folks is to make sure we're a very unique company here. So we happen to be a nurse registry and we
All
follow
right.
those guidelines and those rules. And this is kind of a nice like pivot to say, hey, let's start talking about the gray market. But what matters is that they're gonna and we're going to um, actually we run the references. We're calling these references, and a lot of the caregivers are word of mouth and they come from within. They're calling us because they know us. We haven't used any sort of platform for almost 10 years, like any sort of anything. No, indeed,
Oh,
nothing.
wow.
We've met all people from nursing schools, from caregivers referring caregivers. I mentioned about my brother's transportation business,
Yeah.
super unique type of business. We happen to be a nurse registry. I am super keen on service and making sure that I'm here for the client as well, just to do that introduction, to make sure they have some support. And
All
it's
right.
we play by the rules of a registry, but we are operating in the most effective way to make sure people want to work with us. So that's the advantage of working with Welcome Back Home Care is you're getting these super amazing local resources and national resources. So that's the Welcome Back Home Care that happens to be a nurse registry. To answer your question about, is there a direct correlation to a benefit of working with a nurse registry as opposed to a nurse agency? I don't think so. I
All
don't
right.
think so at all.
Just a different way to go about doing the business. And I figured, there are many ways to do business, and I figured it would be interesting for listeners to know the different ways that they can find a caregiver.
Hmm.
And then you're doing it one way, and it would probably be interesting for people who are learning and try to educate themselves, and they say, hey, listen, I might want to go down this route and go with the registry because this makes more sense for me than going in another direction.
Hmm.
But one of the things that affects us all is with gray markets, with handling, with working with customers that are considering being a customer of ours and paying us for our services, or to hire a caregiver privately, and that's where kind of the gray market terminology is from.
Yeah.
And so it's certainly something that I think is a concern with all agency owners of there are a lot of people out there that are considering hiring caregivers privately. And so kind of what are your thoughts on that, and
Hmm.
what do you think about that whole situation?
Sure. And there's a couple different gray market points I would want to bring up. That you could be hiring in the gray market, right? Hiring a private caregiver who has their certification, right? Who has a background check. I advise to, if you're thinking about that, to run a local background check to get that person's driver's license, to hopefully have somebody with a certificate, that's not expired, and somebody who has experience in the field. So you can always ask for these documents. I think it would be a normal thing to do, to ask for these documents before you're going to bring someone into the house. And so the other part is the people that don't have licenses that are just going to, put their card on, make up a Vistaprint card. I like Vistaprint, nothing against them, but, onto the message board or a Craigslist post, which is free and easy. And, they don't know how to properly transfer, or they don't know how to properly work with someone with dementia. And, we could basically, cause an episode or even worse. So that's part of it. What we're going into is the safety aspect, because of the training.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I think what we've seen is that, and I'm sure this is happening out in California. California, for the background for people, um, they made it so that if in Massachusetts, I assume it's the same way down in Florida. If somebody works 40 hours a week, regardless for the most part of the lengths of shifts, as long as it's under 40 hours, they're getting paid at least minimum wage, but there's no overtime involved. In California, they made a law that said if anybody works over an 8-hour shift, they automatically get overtime, which is obviously a really great benefit for those that are doing the work. But it basically eradicated live-in care, because live-in care is usually 16-hour work days, 8 hours sleeping time. People do 2, 3, 4 days. There's a little bit of
Mhm.
overtime involved in that. But and the point being is that, I'm sure one of the areas that home care companies are frustrated with out in California is that all of the live-in business probably just went to the gray market, right? So this whole segment of somebody's business was eradicated, and now it's the gray market where people are hiring caregivers privately. And that comes with some benefits, and it comes with some risks. And so, when we talk to family members about that, it says, hey, listen, I'm not going to be able to charge you what you can go and hire a caregiver for privately, because we obviously have a team at Minute Women that's doing these things, and there's a lot of costs associated with that. But the biggest risk that an individual has is, I would say, the first one is the IRS and paying your FICA and paying the caregiver's FICA, and then the insurance, and then the issue with abuse or theft or some type of issue like that. And that's where families really need to think about when you're looking at hiring a caregiver privately. And we had this experience at Minute Women before I was the owner, where the IRS went after somebody and said, "Where's all this person's social security? Where's all their unemployment benefits? All of these things that you were supposed to be paying." And the family realized that, they had a big bill coming their way because they had hired this caregiver for like 7 years
Yeah.
and done it privately. So it can be
Yeah.
some
And it's
challenges when
no
it comes to
laughing
that.
matter. Everybody pay your taxes. You have to pay your taxes on these caregivers. You can't just, the caregivers have to pay tax and their employee, so it's a fine line. We had that instance where a family, and we jumped in and we kind of got the ADP thing, and we got we got them on board as with Welcome Back, and they got their direct deposit. We they can pull up their pay stubs and all that. And we kind of helped stop that cash flow type of thing. And it's just safer bet oftentimes to work with you don't have to deal with all that stuff with the hiring an employee. You got to
Yeah.
talk to your accountant about that if you're hiring a caregiver, for sure.
Yeah, and
Eh,
it can be complicated quickly. And there are companies out there that help you deal with that. But if you look at from somebody's already stressed out, somebody's already feeling like they're barely keeping their head above water, figuring out that whole aspect
Oh
might be a
yeah,
lot for somebody.
and that's where we have geriatric care management comes into play, but not to go off into a different rabbit hole. But you brought up a great point, which was the team. You have a team that you have to provide for, just like you're the provider and you're providing and helping. You also have a great team that people don't kind of. I'm not trying to tap myself on the shoulder or whatever, but it's the most important thing, and your team as well that you mentioned. You hit the nail on the head. This is the difference between the gray market and the real market. And we're talking about a team that you have backup support, on call, people to talk to 24/7. You're trusted. You have affiliations in the community and resources you can provide to. If you need any coordinating, or if somebody's late, I'm sure somebody will let you know. You got just a lot of people to talk to in case you may need more hours or less hours. You always have someone back up and on call. And your loved ones won't be unprotected because of your using Minute Women Clinic. I'm sorry, Minute Women Home Care.
Don't worry
And
about it.
this is a team, and you pay a lot of money, I'm sure, to make sure that you have a very strong team, of foundation to protect this local community, Boston. And look at these Celtics. I mean, they're amazing, aren't they, so far? The
Yeah,
Boston Celtics.
so far so good. Yeah, and so I agree with you that it can be easy for families, understandable that I I remember when I ran an HOA for my condo, and if you put down new carpet, people would see the carpet and go, "Oh, my money's going to something worthwhile." But if you had to fix the plumbing of the building that nobody saw, that cost a lot of money to fix, but nobody saw that, then it was like, well, where's all my money going to? And my
Sure.
point being is, when you have a team of 5, 6, 10, 12 people that are helping manage these clients and our cases and keep everything running smoothly, there's a lot in the back of the house that I think people don't realize is going on. And I know we've hired caregivers from being a caregiver to being a scheduler or somehow working in the office, and
Yeah, wonderful. We have that in common as well.
yeah, and they're shocked at how difficult it gets. And they go, "I didn't realize that when I called out a couple hours beforehand, how much of a pain
Hmm.
that was. I figured you'd find somebody in 5 minutes." And it's like, well, no, it doesn't always work out that way. We don't have a warehouse that we house all the caregivers in and we just pluck one off the shelf
Yeah.
and they go out. It's
Yeah.
it's a bit more involved than
No,
that.
caregivers are human beings, wonderful people that have lives and have families, and also love to enjoy themselves and go out on a Saturday night, go to church on Sunday morning, and just there's a lot of family values I notice with caregivers. So it's not, if you're dedicated to your, going out on Saturday with your son because we didn't have any cases for you, and we call you on Saturday morning and say, hey, can you come in? No, I'm at the zoo and I'm having a great time, and I'm not going to come in. Okay, it's fine, no problem. I'm going to call this next person. She's really good too. Whatever it is, we have to, but it's not a fun thing to do. I've felt the pressure. I've been in operations. We've been in business for 9 years. So, I can tell you stories of when I first started. I was working as a waiter at an Italian restaurant, and about 6 o'clock, someone called, my first client ever. I'm working, and I'm behind the bar, like, tucked behind the bar. And my manager is like, what is Lee doing over there? And, the phone call was super important to me. And I couldn't hear anything else. I wanted to make sure I got that client's information, and, we got it done. We got the case. So anyway, that was the beginning. And now we've just learned so much and have a great team in place. And I get the metaphor, it's like beneath the surface, you don't always see. And I have to give a shout here. This hat, is Beachkeepers Incorporated. If you go to beachkeepersinc.org, they're a 501c3. I pick up with them today. I picked up with them last week. I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years. I'm trying to bring my company, Welcome Back Home Care, and do some sort of a organizational cleanup. We just love it. And we're talking about beneath the surface. And that's what we do. We pick things up. We're going off into the mangroves, and we're really restoring these areas that people are walking by. They're the best areas in the world, but nobody looks beneath the surface and to see what really is over there. And there's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of animals, there's a lot of water, and a lot of soil that's being polluted. And I'm not like a big, I'm not going to go off on this tangent, but it kind of, I piggybacked off your point. There's a lot that are behind the scenes that people don't see, a lot of stuff that, goes on each and every day. My team is the most amazing people, working to make sure that these folks in the community are getting the best service, because it comes from the top. I'm a very nice person, but definitely I want to have a great customer experience for everybody, and that's not easy.
Yeah. So what are some of the other things that you're concerned about with the gray market? Like where do you see things going, and what are the concerns that you have?
Yeah. So clearly we've heard some stories out there. We mentioned, this is your loved ones. So we're talking about the team. We're going to have the right fit. When we're using an agency, you have choices, you have options, you have meetings, you have, documentation and everything. So we spoke about that. The training and the research. A lot of times the caregivers have worked on these cases before. We're talking about safety. A lot of times agencies will give you these checklists, and, just even if you don't work with us, make sure that you don't leave these valuables around. If you have to, work in this gray market, lock things up, and don't leave any credit cards around or anything like that. Try to get this background information, background check. It takes about a day in your local sheriff's office. We run a national check, but the local check is probably a good idea. Ask for a copy of their driver's license. And these are things like I'm trying to say, these are things, proper steps to take before you let these folks into the home, because if they don't want to give you their driver's license, I think it's a red flag.
Gotcha. So your recommendation would be getting a driver's license, running a background check, as a bare minimum to just find out what's
Getting your own
going on.
references, asking them where they worked before, what kind of experience do they have. It takes a little bit of legwork, but you need to protect your loved one. You have to protect your spouse. So these are proactive. So, the reason I'm talking about this is because the major difference between working with someone and someone you don't know, most 95%. Recently, I've been building up these organizational relationships, so it's starting to change, but 90% of our clients and caregivers are word of mouth. So, we're having people that know us. We know them. They know us. So you have these affiliations and pretty much an organic group of people that are birds of a feather flock together type of thing, and there's kind of there's a trust, and there's a bit of a universal law here that when you're doing your work and you're, making sure everybody's, has checks and balances. And there's ways to check on the caregivers. Yeah, these people. That's where I'm trying to get at, right? We know these folks. So I wouldn't feel comfortable calling on a stranger. I know that sometimes the clients, they find out who's the caregiver in the community, and at least I don't get upset with them if they, the neighbor uses a caregiver from Welcome Back Home Care. Like, they're not, that happens. At least they got lucky enough to have a caregiver that was working with Welcome Back Home Care at one point. I just want to keep these people safe. I'll work with you on the cost or anything like that. I want these folks vetted. I don't want anybody getting hurt or anybody getting upset, or any of this abuse and neglect type of stuff. It could be just, ignorance. If you say you want to do it for the money and you don't have the training, and somebody is in bed and you don't know to turn them, I consider that neglect and abuse. And so it's kind of, it can be a scary thing. So we're talking about people knowing better and people being trained, and all of the caregivers that work with the registry or an agency have to have these education training courses, reminders. Well, I'm always trying to remind myself and, educate myself and, just whatever it is to be grateful, but these folks also have to remind themselves to best practices and what to do. Wash your hands before you walk into a house. These caregivers know about this stuff. It's the basics.
Yeah, so I mean, that's I think what you're saying is that, when you're going through a company like ours, yours or mine, there's a base level of training that happens. There's a base level of that we're vetting these individuals and looking for specific things. And because we do this hundreds of times a month or thousands of times a year, we really are keen in knowing kind of some of those red flags. And when you're hiring somebody privately, you really need to do your due diligence. You need to have some questions ready. You have to be observant. Is somebody coming in? Do they smell? Do they look like they haven't washed their hands in a long time? Are they acting in a way that's dismissive or not really interested? Or are they giving you the impression that they really care and they want to do a good job for your loved one? And I think that's the risk that you have when somebody who's new to this, being a family member who's just trying to find somebody, is going to maybe overlook some of those things, versus when you have a trained HR generalist or recruiter that working for a company that's been doing this for a long time, they're going to be able to pick up and sniff out some of those red flags a lot easier and a lot quicker than somebody who's doing this for the first time. And
Yeah,
that can be a problem that some families find.
I get that, right? So this lady, say Mrs. Sue interviews a caregiver, and okay, she seems nice. She's available next week. Next thing you know, who comes next week? It's her sister. Dude. So you just never know what could happen. Are they going to be there? Their children are super important, like we mentioned about, so if their child has a sickness or an illness, or, they need their mother, the caregiver is going to leave that house, and they don't have any accountability really to leave. And also think about this, right? You've been in your company's name has been in business for 50 years. You have a track record with people, right? You have these folks are on many cases. You have your own, references, and like, you didn't even run them. You hear back from the clients, and they tell you how amazing this person was, what an impact on my life. You get the reviews on Google, you just know eventually these folks are good people, and we have a track record, and, yeah, we're not going to be complacent or like, we still want to continue to, every case is brand new. So you may be great on one case, but not, something happens, a personality conflict, or, there's all different types of, and that's why I believe your company is going dementia specific.
Correct.
for the
Yes.
most part. So if that kind of can keep a little bit of continuity, and I would say like even like a great baseline for the caregiver, knowing that for the most part, she can learn from that case she was on last time, and she'll apply it to the next case she's on this time. So we try to do that.
Yeah, and you bring up a point. Maybe in this conversation we've talked about kind of some of the major things that can occur, whether it's the IRS, whether it's allowing somebody with a checkered background into your home caring for a loved one, that can lead to some bad situations. But what is most common to happen, and you brought it up, is that there's a scheduling conflict. There's some type of situation that comes up that's either on the client side or the caregiver side that no longer matches up, and there's going to be a gap of hours that somebody's not going to be in. Maybe it's an emergency, car accident, a family member goes into the hospital. Maybe on the caregiver side, maybe the client all of a sudden says, hey, listen, I need different hours and I have to have this because mom's not sleeping at 8 o'clock anymore. She's up till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I need you to stay here for 3 or 4 hours because she's a wanderer and she has dementia, or she's a fall risk and she could fall. And that schedule doesn't work out anymore. And that is where I think we see a lot more of the common day-to-day issues, is that there's a scheduling challenge. Something happens where a caregiver can't make it to a specific shift anymore. Maybe that's ongoing, or maybe that's just on a sporadic basis. And
Yeah.
if you only have one caregiver in the home, or even if you have two doing a combination of the 7 days, it's going to be very difficult to manage that and handle that scheduling when somebody
Yeah.
says, hey, listen, I can't make it tomorrow because there's the X, Y, and Z problem going on, and
Yeah.
you're going to have to figure this out.
Yeah, and there's unlimited, limitless variables that could happen. But something different about your company, and about Welcome Back Home Care, we have a caregiver who's our assistant coordinator. So we say, look, no client left behind. No caregiver left behind. We're gonna have that backup system, to make sure, in case of an emergency, we have such a great loyal group of people who. She was on our podcast, Patricia Goldhorn, just an amazing caregiver. I've known her for 10 years. And literally said that no caregiver left behind. If they need me, I'll be there. And she has the ability to do that. Licensed, we make sure, just like, fully compliant, to go in there right when you need her. And she's a great person. And, we need to continue working and preparing. This is I see this as a serious situation, and we have a huge responsibility. And if there's a critical care case that needs a caregiver, an extra, everything from changing to transferring, everything, the caregiver is a representation of the client's a representation of the caregiver. So, when the client looks great, that's because the caregiver is great. And because, so when the client looks good and they're fully dressed and they're wearing the hat and they're fully makeup on and they're in the wheelchair and like their nails are done and they look great, the dress is on, that's because the caregiver is proud of herself, because she knows that caregiver is a representation of the client. If the client doesn't look good, that means that the caregiver doesn't look good either. So anyway, that's kind of a bit of, it's a very important, it's a sensitive subject, because, we have our loved ones we're trying to care for in the community. And if that happens and someone's critical care, a total care case, and God bless them, they have husbands, they have sons and, wives, and, we're going to answer that call, no matter what.
Yeah, and I do think that, to be fair to both sides, we should just mention that there are the primary benefit that people are hiring folks privately is for the cost savings, and it can be significant, right? And
Yeah.
there's no point in beating around that bush. And I think the other reason why it's becoming popular is because that's the only choice. Like, it's not necessarily like they're choosing between you, Lee, and going private. they don't have a choice. They don't have the funds to be able to pay the agency. So they're scrounging up the funds that they can to pay somebody privately, and
Mhm.
damn the poor torpedoes. If something goes
Correct.
wrong, then there's nothing we can do about it anyways, because this was our only option. And so I don't want it to make it sound like if you're hiring caregivers privately, that means you're a bad person. There are circumstances in which they don't, an individual
No,
doesn't have a choice. And
no,
the
but
risks
we
there
mentioned a
are
little
just,
bit before. Sorry, and you're right. And there's no
and
victims
I
here.
wasn't
We're
insinuating you
all
were being mean. I was just saying, like, in general, like, it doesn't mean you're a bad person by hiring
no,
privately. There might be the
no.
circumstances that you just have to.
What my purpose in the podcast, the Elder Care Insights podcast, and a little bit of purpose in mission and Welcome Back Home Care is to make sure that we guide people in an empathetic way to make sure they have the resources available no matter what, even if there is a low or no cost there. We're going to explore a 2 to 3 hour, 3 hour shift. We're not scared to try to squeeze in a 3 hour shift. We're not scared to try to, shave $1 an hour or whatever we can do to make it work. We will try our best. And if not under our roof, we're going to talk about best ways to try to alleviate some of that, pain in having to do this all yourself. So there's resources out there. I'm very empathetic and I'll always try my best. And I'm not going to, just hang up. I'm going to take the time. Whoever calls me, whether there's a low income situation, if it's a person on Medicaid, I can help them because we can refer you to a proper organization. If there's VA benefits, there's people that are very much looking to work with you at a no cost basis. Even if you're at home and you can't do it anymore at home, just call us and we're going to refer you to these no cost placement counselor companies. And they're going to, talk to you for an hour and let you know these are the kind of steps to take to get into a assisted living community. And it may be a Medicaid community. You may have a certain allotment per, that you're getting per month that goes towards that, and then you have a little talk and try to find that team of people. It doesn't have to be a care management team, but see if you can have like a team of people that you can kind of work together with to try to give you the resources and provide you with some knowledge of where to go next and to make those decisions. Care management's a good idea. I think people should call a care manager, even if they want to exploit the 1 hour free consultation. Get information from your local experts. Call Ryan. I'm sure you're happy to answer the phone and, I love speaking with people, so if I'm going to speak with you and I say I'll guide you and bring you a resource, I'm going to follow up with you and send you an email on all these resources around. So, that's the best I can. I'm very human, and I think that it's very difficult situation every time I see a stroke victim, somebody who's not doing well, whatever it is, and they're talking about money. I'm just trying my best to think about how can I help? Where are those resources? What type of insurances, can we talk about? Medicare or something like that. So and if if I could, if I had caregivers that I knew privately, I don't know. It's just that's not the way I do it. It would be kind of a conflict of interest because I don't want to, refer privately and then something happens or whatever it is. Our reputation, and we're try our best, and it's a tough business. But I'll do whatever I can do. It's very difficult. It's always changing also. So I would just say call people like Minute Women Home Care, call people like Welcome Back Home Care, find some like trusted people, look on our podcast and see who we've interviewed in the local markets, and see if they can help.
Yeah,
There's lots of
absolutely.
resources out there.
So with wrapping this up, Lee, how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in talking with you, getting some resources, interested in getting home care? What's the best way to reach you?
Sure. You can call us at Welcome Back Home Care, 561 279-6400. And we are in Palm Beach County, Florida. We're also in Broward County, Florida. And we are in the Treasure Coast, which is Martin, Port St. Lucie, and Indian River, which is the city of Sebastian. And yeah, you can email me, lee@welcomebackhomecare.com. I have this super amazing, fun podcast that we're doing at the Elder Care Insights podcast on YouTube. And I want to make sure, Ryan, before we go, that I invite you to Podfest next year. This is a great festival. We'll make sure you get some tickets. And it's amazing people coming out and basically representing themselves in a podcast. It's an amazing age we're living in with artificial intelligence, with podcasting, with getting your voice out there. There's very awesome people that are out there and trying to help people. And so I think we're one of them. I really do, because I know that you care so much, or else you wouldn't be investing all this time and resources into education and finding the right people to talk to and aligning yourself in that great group to, just at the end of the day, I believe it's about benefiting the community.
Well, thank you so much for that. We'll look into the Podfest. That sounds quite interesting. And to our listeners, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. We appreciate it. And we will catch you on the next one.